Thank you very much, Sarah. Now, later on this evening, Her Majesty the Queen will appear in a BBC One documentary to celebrate 65 years since her coronation, and it does genuinely look fascinating, this.
Yeah, it's such an insight that we get from it. The Queen, of course, never given a formal interview, but tonight's programme sees her discuss the day of the coronation, the jewels, the crown, the gold carriage. As Rachel says, incredibly rare to hear the Queen's personal thoughts. And
in a moment, we're going to speak to Victoria Howard, who's a royal historian. But first of all, let's just take a brief look.
The Queen set out for Westminster Abbey in the Gold State coach. It weighs nearly 4 tons.
Horrible. It's not meant for travelling in at all. I mean, it's just not, it's only sprung on leather.
So it rocks around a lot?
It's not very comfortable.
Were you in it for a long time, then? Probably
halfway around London.
Really?
We must have gone about 4 or 5 miles. You can only go at a walking pace.
Yeah.
The horses couldn't possibly go any faster.
Right.
It's so heavy.
Really?
Mm.
But you look really high up there, so I presume the view...
But it is very high. I mean, look at the size of the man.
Yeah.
What an insight you get, don't you?
Yeah.
You sort of don't really think about
It's also
how
amazing just to see those
might be.
pictures in colour. Well, let's talk to royal historian then, Victoria Howard.
Good morning.
Have you had a preview of this? Have you been able to see much of it?
I've seen what you've seen, these clips the BBC have released, and royal historians and fans alike, we're fascinated by this because, as you say, the Queen, she's never really spoken to the press in this way before. And it's just given us a real insight into her personal experience of the coronation, which was such a huge day in her life.
So what have we learned so far? We know that maybe the coronation wasn't quite as smooth as perhaps we would believe. Things like the dress, the carriage, all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Clearly some issues there, but, you know, on the day, it all went smoothly, certainly from the public point of view.
Yes, definitely. And as you say, we don't know any of this information. So the Queen talking about it, giving us those little tidbits of information, it makes her more human to us, which, you know, as the monarchies, there's this veil of mystique around them because that's part of the package, I guess. They can't be too like us, or what's the point in having them? But it does make her more normal. So to know that that choir boy was the one leading the pack in the singing at the Abbey, you just think, oh, wow, these things happen to the Queen too. So
it's fascinating that she's there to kind of carry out this role, this majestic role that goes back thousands of years, doesn't it? Hundreds of years anyway, in British history. And yet she's having to think about, oh, how am I going to get there? Because this carriage is absolutely killing me. And how am I going to keep this crown on my head? Because it's so heavy. Yeah. So actually, she's just trying to get through the process.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, there will have been rehearsals. So she will have practiced with the crown, or, as we've read in various books, bags of flour to replicate the weight on her head. So to know that she also had these fears and she was just trying to get through that day, it's quite magical.
And there's a great clip, this point here, when they place the crown down in front of her, and she almost looks at it as if she's never seen it before. But there is an element of, you know, in my mind, you would sort of imagine it's something she might see pretty regularly, but it's very rare that they both, you know, in the same room.
She's only seen St Edward's crown once when she was crowned. The Imperial State crown, which we just saw there, she sees that yearly when she opens Parliament. But it was created for her father, George VI, and if you notice in this clip here, she's wearing quite a large diamond brooch. Now, the royals are big fans of subtlety and hints. And these diamonds in this brooch, they are the same, they're part of the same larger Cullinan diamond, which form the front of the Imperial State crown, the large diamond to the front of it that you can see there. And also in the sceptre of state, there's a very large diamond in that. So we get to see more of the Queen doing what she does best, these subtle hints, and also harking back to history.
And of course, televising the coronation was pretty groundbreaking in itself.
Absolutely.
How significant is this? The fact that we're hearing so much from the Queen and so much personal information from the Queen?
It's very significant. So the last time she really did anything like this was 1992, and it was a documentary called Elizabeth R. Now, that was pulled. It is still floating around on YouTube, but the archives have pulled it. It's not allowed to be seen by the public anymore because it was deemed to be so personal. The Queen talks about her role, her duties, you know, what she gets up to on a day-to-day basis, and her family as well. She narrates the documentary herself. And in her 65th year, the 65th anniversary of her coronation, I think they thought this was a good time to look back and do something quite personal. But I think it also shows she's taking a leaf out of the younger royals' book. You know, they're more than happy to be these normal people, you know, with social media and really getting involved with the people. And the Queen knows that the monarchy has to be relevant and popular to continue. So by doing these small things, she's really making sure that the monarchy continues.
How interesting. Victoria, thank you for explaining all that. Victoria Howard there. And you can watch that full documentary. It's not an interview, it's televised Thoughts on the Queen. It's called The Coronation. It's on BBC One at 8 o'clock tonight.
It's 22 minutes.